There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. We have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities. I think about this issue through the lens of my baby nieces, who are 1.5 and 3 years old. And when I look at those babies and I think about what the world will be like in 20 years if we don't act, I'm really afraid. And as it relates to those Republicans in Congress, where I've now been for 2.5 years, every one of those members need to look at the babies, the grandbabies in their life, and then look in the mirror and ask themselves, why have they failed to act?
And in 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
Happy Labor Day weekend, everybody. This is Lad Dilgard with another episode of Stand and Speak. This is election season. Labor Day weekend is the traditional kickoff for the campaign season. We've got a lot of tight races going on right now. And of course, the presidential race is very tight between the Trump-Vance ticket and the Harris-Walz ticket. Today, I'd like to talk about the candidacies of Walz and Harris and how I think they profoundly disconnect between what voters want and what those two have stood for years and years. I don't understand how the polls are actually tied when voters have said consistently that they disagree with what Walz and Harris are on record of talking about for a long time, espousing and talking about. So I'm going to talk about those positions and consider why it hasn't sunk in on the electorate once again that they might be voting for something that they don't want. I'm old enough to remember that back in 2020, Joe Biden promised to run as a unifier. People thought he was a moderate who would gently manage the country for 4 years until the next generation was ready to step up. And we got something significantly different than that. What we got was 4 years of a Green New Deal, divisive rhetoric, far left policies, and a dementia-ridden old man who refused to leave office until his own party staged a coup to get him off of the ticket. How are Americans going to avoid getting suckered again just like that? Let's start with the polls. Right now, polls have Trump and Harris mostly in a dead heat. Swing state polls are within the margin of error. The gambling markets have Trump a tiny bit ahead, maybe 50 to 49. It depends on which day you're looking at. But no matter how you look at this race, it is a toss-up. So the question becomes, why is it that it is a toss-up when Harris and Walz have espoused such far left policies for so long and have in fact governed as leftists that are out of touch with mainstream America? And I consider the fact that the answer lies in the fog and complexity of a national election, gaslighting by Harris and Walz, and media complicity to pile onto any narrative that Harris and Walz instructs. Then there's the large portion of the electorate who just don't pay attention and understand. That's my take on it. But let's look policy by policy as to where they're out of touch and what the deal is. First of all, the electorate wants lower energy prices. They like fracking. They like low gas prices, but Harris and Walz have worked against that for years. Harris said in the 2019 campaign that she will ban fracking on day one.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. We have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities. I think about this issue through the lens of my baby nieces, who are 1.5 and 3 years old. And when I look at those babies and I think about what the world will be like in 20 years if we don't act, I'm really afraid. And as it relates to those Republicans in Congress, where I've now been for 2.5 years, Every one of those members need to look at the babies, the grandbabies in their life, and then look in the mirror and ask themselves, why have they failed to act?
And in 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
She is a Green New Deal zealot. There's nothing in their track record that says they want low gas prices and that they are in favor of things like fracking. Second, less inflation. Kamala Harris was part of the Biden administration that spent trillions of dollars in Green New Deal giveaways and just bridges to nowhere that caused the 9% inflation that we had in 2022, that despite what they say now is still at 2.9%, double what it was when they took office. When Trump left office, inflation was 1.4%. Biden and Kamala Harris got in, they spent like drunken sailors. We got 9% inflation. It's still double what the Federal Reserve considers the target, which is 1.5% to 2% inflation year over year. So Americans don't like paying more for milk and eggs. You know, they don't like paying more for gasoline. But that is what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have given us. Third, free speech.
He has lost his privileges, and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that you can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. The same rule has to apply, which is that there has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
Americans don't like censorship. They think you should be able to speak out. If you're have a minority position on a matter, you should be able to say so. You should be able to go on Facebook, put out that minority position, and let people see it. Now, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, as we now know from the letter that Mark Zuckerberg provided to Jim Jordan in the House committee, they wanted Facebook and pushed until Facebook censored competing opinions on COVID. That's not a guess. That's a fact. They are strongly in favor of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are strongly in favor of being able to censor and delete opposing opinions. They've said it multiple times, many, many times over the years, especially concerning COVID, but concerning many other things as well. People don't like censorship. They do like the First Amendment. But not Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They're on a different side of that issue. They don't like, fourth, the American voters, they don't like mandates. They don't like to be told that you have to buy an electric vehicle. They don't like to be told that you have to take this vaccine. But Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they will ban gasoline-powered cars through the EPA between 2027 and 2032. That is something you can verify and look up. Gas-powered vehicles, they don't like them. Kamala Harris would like to ban gas-powered vehicles and mandate that you buy an EV, whether you can afford it or not. And eventually, only the elites are going to have vehicles, and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are fine with that because they are the elites. And in terms of vaccine mandates, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden took their vaccine mandate all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. They wanted, through OSHA, to mandate that over 100 million people get a vaccine for COVID, whether you like it or not, whether you needed it or not. They mandated that military people get those vaccines, federal employees, anybody that they could mandate get a vaccine, they mandated it. American people don't like that. They like to be, get a recommendation on an electric vehicle or a COVID vaccine, but they want to make that decision for themselves. 5, American voters do not want to end up like Venezuela. They do not want communist types of price controls. They don't want communist types of corruption and regulation.
It has to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution. Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place, right? We are proud of the fact that equity is one of our guiding principles. Proud of the fact that we understand equality is important, but not everybody starts out on the same base. We see that people in our country are having an experience that is not equal. So when we talk about the work we are doing here together, it is recognizing that and being guided by this principle of what we must do in the spirit and in the interest of equity. To put equity firmly at the center of our economic policy. But no, if you look at the reality of who will benefit from certain policies, when you take into account that they're not starting at the same place and they're not starting on equal footing, it will directly benefit Black children, Black families, Black homeowners.
But that is what Kamala Harris has recommended, even to the dismay of many in the media and of many liberal economists over the last couple of weeks. Kamala Harris's economic policy is, hey, let's control prices of groceries through the FTC. Let's sick the bureaucrats on these greedy grocers who have a 1.5% to 2% margins on their food and eggs and milk. And let's bully them and find out why they're overcharging Americans. Because companies, as you know, have been greedy since 2021 when they were never greedy before during the Trump administration. Now they're greedy. So Americans know that price controls have failed in Cuba, Venezuela, the Soviet Union. Even Richard Nixon tried those price controls back in the 1970s. It always leads to shortages. It never fixes anything, and it makes matters worse. It is the dumbest economic policy I can think of, except the other Kamala Harris policy, which is to raise revenue for the federal government by taxing unrealized capital gains, which means that if your house goes up in value from one year to the next, maybe $200,000 to $250,000, according to Kamala Harris's latest policy recommendation, you would have to pay taxes on $50,000 of unrealized capital gains. That's madness. Now, they never disclose what happens if your price declines in value, which happens sometimes. If the value of your house goes from $250,000 to $200,000, does the government send you a check based on that $50,000 drop? Of course not. So American people, do not want Venezuela-style communist price controls and unrealized capital gains taxation, which is sheer madness. But that's what the Harris campaign came up with. That is their economic policy. 6, parental rights, especially when it comes to things like, how do I say this correctly? Transgender ideology. If your little boy or girl goes to school and tells everybody, let's say your little boy goes to school, they're 8 years old, and they say, I'm now a girl and you need to call me Mary and refer to my pronoun as a she. Now, Tim Walz passed a law in Minnesota that prohibited the schools and teachers from telling parents about that you're not allowed to tell the parents that this little boy went to school and decided he was a girl and he's going to be called Mary. It made it illegal. Now, I think parents in the bluest of blue cities, you could go into San Francisco or Chicago or New York and ask them if they wanted to be informed that their little boy or little girl went to school and decided they were a different gender and had a different name. I think, I don't have a poll, but I would guess that 80 to 90% of parents would want to be informed that this is occurring. So Tim Walz, and by extension, Kamala Harris, they're on the different side of this. They're on the police state side of the government knows all and will keep all that information within that school district. And parents, you don't have any right to that info. Number 7, secure borders. We all know Donald Trump had, to the very best of his ability from the executive branch, the southern border mostly secure, and the flow of illegal immigrants was down to a trickle in 2020. Despite not getting a lot of help from Congress and having to rework military funds to build part of the border wall, he, through sheer energy and determination, slowed down the flow of illegal immigrants. Day one of the Biden administration, they started signing executive orders. I think it was 165 of them, rolling back all of the measures that Trump had put in place to stem the flow of illegal immigrants. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz voted for, supported, and spoke out against the border wall. They voted for keeping the border open. Tim Walz once said that if there's a 25-foot wall, he's going to invest in the 30-foot ladder factory. And they have put illegal immigrants in hotels in Minneapolis and on and on and on. Clearly, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are for an open border. Let's make no mistake about that. They want illegal immigrants here. They want them unvetted, and they want as many of them as they can get. To pretend otherwise is ludicrous. Come on. So when Kamala Harris was named the border czar, did she go to the border and think about ways to fix it there and to keep illegal immigrants out of our country? No, she flew straight to Central America, to 3 countries that were providing a significant amount of illegal immigrants to the United States, and allegedly looked for root causes that was causing these illegals to come up here. We all know what the root cause was. They're poorer down there and we're better managed up here still. So she promised them a lot of money. She gave them a lot of pity, and it never solved anything. Right now, the last I heard, there were illegal immigrants from 150 countries around the world flowing across our southern border, mostly unvetted. We stopped the return to Mexico policy and just let illegals go free that we captured, caught, whatever you want to call it. Just let them go free in the United States. Kamala Harris is part of the administration that executed upon that. Most people, most Americans, do not want an open border. They don't want criminals coming across the border and killing people and taking over hotels in Aurora, Colorado, or taking up, apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, or taking over hotels in Chicago while veterans and minorities sleep on the streets. This is insane. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, they are for open borders. And the last thing, and I could go on, there's dozens of other disconnects from the Harris and Walz policy positions as to what people want. But the last one is crime. Kamala Harris she said she's a prosecutor who puts people in jail, transnational criminals, and all of this kind of stuff. Let's be clear, as she likes to say. During the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020, Tim Walz sat around for 3 days before deploying the National Guard, despite the mayor of Minneapolis begging him to deploy them while that city was burnt to the ground by rioters. I don't think he had any problem. He has said many things over the years, which leads to one to sympathize that Walz sympathized with the rioters, not the 1,500 businesses that got burnt to the ground in Minneapolis. Kamala Harris raised funds to get rioters out of jail. These people killed, they mugged, they burnt businesses to the ground that hard-working people had built up, small businesses. Kamala Harris took the other side. Tim Walz took the other side. So if you've got a hardware store in Minneapolis and 100 rioters came and burned it to the ground, would Tim Walz sympathize with you? Not from any public statement I've ever seen. Would Kamala Harris give you a call and say, I'm sorry, you were innocent. You were not part of the George Floyd thing, but your business got burned to the ground. I'm sorry, can I help you? When have they ever said that? They don't care. They don't care about criminals. They think criminals are doing them a favor by forwarding their agenda, which is racial grievances, that will cover up their incredible economic policy failures and their failure to manage. And I would just throw in one more there, number 9. American people want competence in their leadership. I'm talking about competence like Ron DeSantis after Hurricane Ian type of competence. If you know anything about what happened in Florida after the hurricane, I've got a house there. I know a lot of people there. As that hurricane went through, DeSantis had electrical equipment staged, hundreds and thousands of people ready to go out and build bridges and put power back on and fix things and keep the public communicated with the whole time. It was outstanding execution. That is leadership and competence. That's one example. I could think of other governmental leaders who have executed very well. But in terms of competence of leadership, the current cabinet in the Biden-Harris administration, I wouldn't hire any of those secretaries to manage a subway shop or a gas station. I don't think any of them know what they're talking about, and I don't think any of them execute. Let's talk about the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, the supply chain snafus. What did he ever do about those? There was ships backed up halfway to Hawaii, and Pete Buttigieg was on an extended paternity leave for months. He did not give birth to anyone through his body, but he took a paternity leave, which is unbelievable. Joe Biden took a year to go to East Palestine, Ohio, to visit the scene of a terrible train wreck. Pete Buttigieg took, I don't know how long, 10 days or something like that, to visit the scene of this accident. That is not competence. That is not leadership that instills, encouraging feelings for your leaders. American people want competence. Kamala Harris and her cabinet with Joe Biden have shown zero competence as far as I'm concerned. Tim Walz has mismanaged Minnesota so poorly that people are leaving Minnesota. The population has gone up slightly if you include illegal immigrants and some others, but thousands, I think it was 7,000 people from Minnesota have relocated to South Dakota. 50,000 or so have relocated to Wisconsin. Many thousands have relocated to Florida. It's not hard to go online to see an interview with somebody who said, I'm not staying in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area anymore. It's too crazy. It's too ridiculous. since since Tim Walz and became governor, won re-election in 2022, and then had a majority Democrat legislature. They went hard left, just like Biden and Harris got into office, and they went hard left on Democrat issues, and it's turned Minnesota into a backwater part of the nation, the central part of Minnesota especially. So the question then becomes, what does the Trump-Vance ticket do about this disconnect between the Harris-Walz ticket, what they believe in, and then where voters are? This race is severely shortened this year because of a coup of the Democratic Party, how they've put in a candidate at the last minute who didn't get a single primary vote. The media is helping to hide her from us. She's not done any interviews except one heavily edited interview with CNN with softball questions with her campaign partner sitting right there. It was one of the most pathetic displays of lack of leadership and lack of journalistic curiosity I've ever seen in my life. So we've got gaslighting, flip-flopping, outright lying in this race. It's gone, in my opinion, that lying and gaslighting has gone thermonuclear with the Harris-Walz campaign, and the mainstream media is complicit, and they're running on all cylinders, trying to cover up her record, her far left record. I don't know why the media does that. I guess the media journalists are really far left. They continue to show that. But even this year, it's been a little bit too much for them. Even the price controls and the communist advocating for communist policies when your opponent is calling you a communist is not the best solution. So what I say is, for those of you who say they're voting for or against Donald Trump, like I'm voting against Trump, whatever it is. The better decision might be, or decision to consider might be, will you vote to be gaslit in order to cover up the myriad far left and wacky policy positions that only a minority of voters support? So do what you got to do. I hate Trump, man. He's just, so this and that. But think about that for a second. Are you going to support being lied to about what somebody's positions are? Are you going to just participate in this huge fraud? I mean, you talk about fraud. We have a president in office right now who's not there. He's a shell of himself. And we were told for 3.5 years that, no, he's great, man. He's fine. Joe Biden is fine and dandy. And then he had the debate on June 27th, which was obvious that he was not fine. And then everyone came out, Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer and George Clooney and the media, and they're like, well, he's not fine. He's going to lose because he's so not fine. Clearly has dementia, clearly not all there. I remember, a lot of people don't talk about this, but we were told he has a stuttering problem when he was fumbling his words. You don't hear that much anymore. It was nonsense from the beginning. And I am old enough to remember Joe Biden being on C-SPAN in the 1980s, and even as a vice president 15 years ago, where he was a silver-tongued devil. He was a smooth talker. Now he's full of crap, and he wasn't the brightest guy in the world, but he was no stutterer. But all of a sudden, this dementia-ridden president is fumbling around. He's not there, and they're saying he's got a stuttering problem. You can't make fun of him. Don't you dare question him. He's a stutterer. How dare you make fun of people who stutter? What a load of garbage. So talk about cover-ups. Is someone going to ask Kamala Harris in a serious way, how did you cover up Joe Biden's dementia for 3 years? And why did you lie to the American public that he's like just run circles around everybody. And boy, that guy's got an IQ of 600, and man, he is really sharp. They lied. They covered up. And you're about to be gaslit again through an entire campaign of what Harris and Walz positions are on dozens of issues. They're coming out now saying, Kamala Harris says, I like the border wall idea. Well, one of her underlings has said this. I'm for fracking. I've never been against fracking. I'm for, tough border enforcement. And on that I'm sure you've read in the paper yourselves. But how do you accept that from a leader whose salary you're paying and whose vote they want to get from you? How do you accept that lying and gaslighting from somebody like that? And if Kamala Harris is too dim-witted and Tim Walz is too dim-witted to sit for an interview with Fox or the Wall Street Journal or someone who's not a friendly media for a live, unscripted event, if they're not capable of doing that, how are they capable of negotiating with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Iran and Congress and heaven knows what else? How are they going to manage the apparatus of the entire United States government and be our chief executive officer? And truth be told, the people supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they don't want that or expect it. They know right now, as of Labor Day 2024, there is no president of the United States. The United States is being ran by bureaucrats and administrators, cabinet members, who knows? But no one is directing traffic in Washington, D.C. from the executive branch right now. We know that. Everybody knows that. It's been that way for a long time, maybe since January 6th or January 20th, 2021. But when we talk about that, you realize that no one cares that Kamala Harris is not smart enough to put 4 sentences together without sounding like an imbecile. No one cares because she's not in charge anyway. Tim Walz, he's a wacky, failed Minnesota governor who, if you put him in charge of Hurricane Ian in Florida, the outcome would have been much, much different. There would have been people eating each other and power would still not be on 2 years later in most of those places. So you have to ask yourself, people who I know who are pro-Trump, they're very pro-Trump. They want to go out and vote for him. People who are anti-Trump, a lot of it's personal because they liked the economy. They liked the foreign policy in 2020. We were strong internationally and our economy was strong. Our real wages were up. Our inflation was way down. Things got fixed. Things got done. People know that. From 2017 to 2021 until Joe Biden took office, things got done. Despite relentless, fraudulent attacks from the FBI and the media, Donald Trump got stuff done. Now, there's people, though, that say, hey, man, that guy talks too much. I don't like him. He fooled around with women too much back in the day or something, whatever it is. But ask those folks, do you want to be lied to for another 4 years? Do you want to be shamelessly gaslit and deceived like you have been? You say what you want about Donald Trump, and this is not a commercial video for him. I vote for whoever I think is going to do best for the economy and the best for the people, the American citizens. That's who I vote for. But you say what you will about Donald Trump. People know who he is. People can talk to him. He sits for interviews for hours with all kinds of different people. He goes to his detriment. He speaks to the hostile press who badger, bully him and press his buttons. but you know who he is. He's right out there. You know what he stands for and what he's going to do. He has a track record for 4 years of getting stuff done. So that's all for today. This is Lad Dilgard with Stand and Speak. You can find us on X at Stand and Speak or at Lad Dilgard, LADDILGARD on X. We also have a YouTube channel, Stand and Speak. It's used to be called BW Strategy Pack YouTube site, but you can find us on there. And we hope you have a great week and you stay tuned in. Please subscribe and hit that little thumbs up. Thank you.